And we're back again with another edition of the Fantasy Authority podcast, a little later than we normally like to do it. Normally, we go live on Tuesday nights, and it is Wednesday night. Pretty late for the East Coasters here, 11 o'clock. But, we did want to get it in. We had some things come up this week, as life happens. And I also had a podcast that I committed myself to tonight through Fantrax. So shout out to them for having me on that, which I had some technical difficulties myself, which took a little longer. So anyways, here we are. But we did want to get this out this week and get this podcast out because we feel like that was the thing to do. So we're calling it a late nighter. Got the coffee ready, and old hashtag Hedge Life Cody Kutzer looks like that he's a little tired there with his hair that's like a bunch of spiders crawl on his head and are having a meeting. But it is okay. It is what it is.
Little disheveled. This is how I look after surviving the Week 14 injury apocalypse. So, like you said, man, a little late on the East Coast here. It's 11:15, but we're here, man. We made it, and we're gonna talk Week 15 and get everyone set for the second week of the fantasy playoffs.
Yeah, so I guess, to start it off, I guess I should introduce ourselves. I am Kevin Steele, and you can find me on Twitter at FantasyRat13, and you can find Cody at CKutzerFF on Twitter. And again, as always, you can hit us up, and we can get you into our Slack channel. We are winding down. We are heading into Week 15 here. Only 2 more weeks left until we call it a wrap for the redraft season anyway. But if you're not, you should be checking out the old DFS because especially fantasy or the playoffs, DFS playoffs is where it is at for DFS. It is great times. But anyways, so let's just go ahead and jump into it. Like you already mentioned, I actually tweeted out earlier in the week about, it being the fantasy equivalent of the Red Wedding from Game of Thrones this week. It's been kind of weird because I feel like we sort of talked about it earlier. And where we talked about it throughout the year, that this year has been kind of weird. We haven't seen a ton of injuries, and we had some here and there. Tyreek Hill was out for a few weeks. Devontae Adams missed some time. Pat Mahomes missed a few weeks. We had guys like Big Ben and Cam Newton get shut down. So but we just really hadn't had any like major impact injuries really this year that really just kind of changed the landscape of fantasy football. And it just so happened that it all just all happened in 1 week. So we have a lot to go through in terms of just injury news. So we're still waiting for more on some of these other guys. But right now we know that Mike Evans is likely done for the year. Marvin Jones is out for the year. Calvin Ridley's done for the year. Alshon Jeffrey's done for the year. They place paid on IR. Darius Guice, who's looking promising, is on IR. Rashad Penny, finally the man starts to do something and gets some opportunities and really starts to shine. And then now he is likely done for the year as well. So, there's so many different directions you can go here. I'm sure people that are in the playoffs, that are still in the playoffs, have Mike Evans. He, luckily enough, it wasn't an early wasn't an early game injury. Still had that 61-yard touchdown. So I think he had like 13 fantasy points. So that at least he helps you out a little bit before he, poured one out to the homies for the rest of the year. So, I guess let's just start, with these wide receivers in terms of the injuries. We kind of just talk about them all kind of here in a broad scope. Because if you are like a Mike Evans owner, are you running out and trying to add a Rashad Perriman or even a Justin Watson, who Justin Watson himself last week had 8 targets, I think 59 yards and a touchdown?
Yeah, they're definitely worth an ad whenever you have the gunslinger himself, the quintessential DGAF quarterback of Jameis Winston. But hopefully you have some stronger depth behind that. That's not a play where I'm going to feel super confident because now Scotty Miller is back. He returned to practice today after sitting out last week with the hamstring injury. So I think it kind of remains to be seen how that rotation is going to work behind Chris Godwin. And now OJ Howard is getting more involved. So that's definitely something you have to be aware of until we get some like a clearer picture on how that is going to, like I said, going to parse out. That's a weird one. In Detroit, it's Kenny Galladay or bust. With Marvin Jones hitting IR, that one kind of caught me off guard whenever I saw that come through. Russell Gage. What do you do with Russell Gage? Or is that someone that you'd be going out to get with Calvin Ridley hitting IR with that abdominal injury, or how are you playing that?
If you go back and look at last week, I mean, he didn't really get more opportunities once Calvin Ridley left. So I don't know if that's really a direction that I really want to go. I mean, if you look at, I don't even, I'm going to butcher his names.
Zacchaeus.
Yeah, Zacchaeus. He had only got 2 targets, 93 yards, and the touchdown. Like, he got more opportunity than what Russell Gage got. And I don't know. Like, they still have Christian Blake there. Like, I don't know if Russell Gage is like. I don't think he's going to be the direct beneficiary of this injury to Calvin Ridley. I think it's going to trickle along to guys, and especially. And this is a terrible matchup for the Falcons. They're on the road and in the outdoors. I guess one of the best defenses in the league. Like, this is a tough spot. So, if I was a Calvin Ridley owner, I'd just be looking somewhere else.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the crazy thing with all these top guys, number one or kind of 1A, 1B receivers hitting IR. Like, there's not anyone that jumps out to me as, run out to the waiver and you got to add them. Devontae Parker had a concussion. I guess the report today was that he was at practice, but in a non-contact injury. So I don't know if he did anything off to the side or anything like that. But Isaiah Ford and Alan Hearns became things last week because of that. And can we just fully appreciate Ryan Fitzpatrick? Like, with all the injuries that the Dolphins have dealt with, and then going out and just Isaiah Ford literally out of nowhere becomes a thing. Alan Hearns, I think he also had like 8 targets, and he had himself a decent day. But like I said, man, that's a weird thing with all these injuries, is there isn't anyone that I'd be just running out to the waivers and throwing money at. And then you had somebody like that, or at least we thought, with DeAndre Washington kind of turning our attention to running backs now. And then it came out that Josh Jacobs looks like he's going to play, after people were talking about, looked like he was going to be shelved for the year with that shoulder injury, which, I mean, I guess is still a possibility. The report on the MRI came back today that it was structurally, it looked a lot better than what they thought, but then Gruden kind of came out and was like, well, that doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to play this week. So, I mean, that's still a situation to monitor there as well. But I know a lot of people were pretty upset about that once that came through, and a lot of the waivers had already run for the week.
Yeah, I imagine a lot of people spend a lot of fab or high priority waiver ads on. But I mean, who else are you going to add it on? I mean, we're in week 15. You have 2 weeks left.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, I don't think what else are you going to do? So, yeah, I mean, it is a shame. I remember in DFS last week, I pivoted to a ton of DeAndre Washington on the late, late swap once that news came out. And I mean, he was great last week. I think he had 21 fantasy points, was heavily targeted, which that was one thing that stood out to me. It was as many targets that he received, because this is not something they've really done. With been feeding Josh Jacobs targets, and that's like one of Josh Jacobs' calling card coming into the league, was his ability to catch passes. So I was surprised that they how many targets they really fed him. So you wish they could have done that with Josh Jacobs this year. And not that Josh Jacobs has been bad by any means, because he's probably the rookie of the year this year. I think that at least the offensive rookie of the year for sure. I can't think of anybody else off the top of my head that really stands out as that. It would be that guy. So, I mean, I hope they don't play him, just selfishly, I went out and added him, which I do have a question. Okay. Because I saw this conversation this week on fantasy, on the old Twitter sphere, hashtag fantasy Twitter. And there was a conversation about, if you are out of the playoffs, should you be allowed to make waiver ads in like a redraft league? Now, my thing with this is, now, if it's a league where there's no toilet bowl, there's nothing to, anything like that, then no, I don't think you really should have. Then it is, yeah, it's kind of a dick move to be out here adding guys, over people. But I feel like if there's a toilet bowl, like even if it's a marginal amount of money, if there's anything to be won, yes, I think then it's perfectly okay to be able to go out and add guys. But I know people are just like staunchly against it. Like, no, if you're out of the playoffs, you shouldn't be adding anybody. What is your thoughts?
No, I totally agree. If there's anything on the line, even if, you kind of do something, I know some people give money to the toilet bowl winner just to entice people to, pay attention and keep playing throughout the entire year. Or even if, in some keeper leagues, like I've seen some people kind of do it where you get your pick of the draft for the next year, or that kind of starts the draft order. If you're running the same league with the same people year in and year out. So, yeah, if there's nothing on the line, like you said, it's a dick move to add anybody like that. But if there's anything on the line at all, there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to. Like that, like to me, that would kind of defeat the purpose of having a toilet bowl if you weren't able to make moves. Like, what if your team was just completely awful, because of injuries, or, you really messed up your draft for whatever reason, and now there's, $50 on the line, let's say, in your toilet bowl, and you can't do anything to compete for that. Like that, I don't find that fair either. That's why I think that, Fab is the best way to go, or like we talked about, what was that, 2 weeks ago or so at this point, having the rolling priority, where if you don't move it, you get bumped up the list each week.
Yeah, I completely agree. Because like in our home league, not that anybody cares, but it's so like basically the toilet bowl is half of the entry fee to the league, and it's $100 a person, 12-team league. So it's $50, which isn't obviously life changing at all, but $50, $50, right? And then if you like me, a good example is we also have $10 a week for whoever has the highest score for that week, and I have 4 weeks, I believe, of the highest. So hey, I can win my entry back. So yeah, I don't have a problem with it. I don't think it's that big of a deal. People get upset about everything, but like I said, I feel like as long as there's something to play for, if it's a keeper league and you want to add some guys who maybe you think maybe have some intrigue for next year, something like that, like an AJ Brown, for example, if he happened to be available, which I can't imagine he was, but I know there was some leagues that he probably was available in because he's been kind of hit or miss. But after that monster performance, he's somebody that I think that could have some real intrigue for next year. So yeah, I just kind of think I just thought that was interesting to see people really bitch and complain about that.
Yeah, crazily enough, with just to touch on AJ Brown, he was actually available, and I think he was only 27% owned before waivers ran this week. And I just checked Yahoo, and he's up to 52% as of today. So he actually was pretty widely available across the majority of leagues.
Wow. Okay. So yeah, and that same league is so tilting. I actually scored the most points last week. I scored 178 points. I'm like, unbelievable. And then I got this guy messaging me who's in our league, and he's all upset because he was going to get kicked out of the playoffs. I'm like, dude, shut up. Don't complain to me about your fucking problems. Your team sucks. You shouldn't even be in the playoffs. I should be in the playoffs. Like, shut up. Whatever. It's spilled milk, I guess, by me, but being tilting my face off that. Yeah, I knew it was going to happen too. I knew it. But regardless, so yeah, I think so. I think we kind of hit on all the injuries, I believe. Patrick Mahomes injured his hand against the Patriots. He said he's fine. They gave him an MRI. He got an MRI, came back negative. They've already said today that he's feeling much better. It's just I think it's a bruise, so it's not anything that's serious. I think we already hit on Rashad Penny. DJ Shark was spotted in a walking boot. He did not practice today, so we'll have to monitor. There's a lot of guys that are questionable right now. So I think the other ones, if you really wanted to add something, maybe like a Danny Amendola. We didn't really talk about that with Marvin Jones now going on IR. They don't really have anybody else. I believe they've also lost TJ Hawkinson. So who's going to throw the ball to at this point? So I think Danny Amendola, at least in PPR formats, is at least intriguing.
Right, so, and then just to kind of touch on some of the other injuries, Adam Thielen returned to practice today. Mark Andrews is questionable after he left on Sunday with that ended up being like a knee bruise or something. Greg Olsen was back, so if you had any hopes of being able to stream Ian Thomas this week, you should probably be looking elsewhere. And it seemed Evan Ingram came back for a limited practice today as well. So some guys going out, some guys coming back. It's just just that time of year, man. Like you said, it's kind of crazy that it all just happened to hit this week. But let's get into some of these matchups for the week, man.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and start it off with week 15. So let's start it off with the quarterback position like we do every single, like we've been doing. Right now, I think for me, at least for me personally, I have obviously Lamar Jackson at QB1. Shocker, like he gets the Jets. He has torched everybody this year. He put up 24 last week in a really bad and a kind of a brutal matchup. Or a tough matchup against the Bills. Yeah, I mean, Lamar Jackson has been matchup proof, and now he's back to one of the best matchups. I mean, this dude could go out and score 45, so you're not even thinking about it. It's Lamar Jackson or bust at number one. And then from there, for me, I love Jameis Winston this week. I know some people may be a little bit afraid of him. I know it's been an interesting conversation with him all year. People have been so afraid, and people, trash him, say he's horrible. Whatever you think of him for fantasy purposes, he's great.
Yep.
Okay. I think he's put up. He has 6 or 7 weeks this year where he of QB1 numbers, and for reference, Russell Wilson, who everybody is talking about being MVP, I don't think as much anymore, but was in the conversation at least a couple of weeks ago, and how great he's been. He's only had 6 weeks of QB1 weeks this year. So I mean, him and Jameis are right there on the same plateau. But yes, Jameis Winston's going to throw interceptions. If you're in a league where it's a -4 for interceptions, yeah, you don't want to play Jameis. However, if it's just a typical -2, -3, yeah, play Jameis. He's crushing it. He dropped 43, had 450 yards passing, 5 touchdowns last week, 1 on the ground. Now he gets Detroit this week. Now it will be interesting to see how things play out now without Mike Evans on the field, but they were fine last week, even without Mike Evans in the second half. So I think they have enough talent to get by, and Detroit's defense is not anything that scares me. So I actually have Jameis Winston as my number 2 quarterback this week.
Yeah, I mean, I think the only thing that you even have to be slightly concerned about is the hand injury. How much does that hold him back? And then, going up against Detroit, they're done. I mean, they've been done for a while, but the only other concern would be they get up early, and then it's a heavy dose of Peyton Barber and Ronald Jones, because their rushing defense isn't anything to be worried about either. But yeah, I don't like NFL quarterback. You probably don't want him as your franchise quarterback, but for fantasy purposes, like you said, unless you're getting crazy deductions for fumbles and picks or anything like that, Jameis Winston has been awesome, because every time it happens, feels like it happens every week too. Like I have him in a bunch of leagues, and I'll get the sleeper alert that Winston just threw a pick or a pick 6 or whatever, and it's the second or third throw of the first drive, and you just kind of drop your head and say, here we go again. But by the end of the game, you're looking at 350 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 4 turnovers, and he's still putting up those QB1 weeks every single week. So yeah, man, I like that. I like that call a lot. Drew Brees at home in the Dome against Indy, you got to like that matchup as well. I mean, even though you want to talk about not having anybody else to throw to, I mean, Kamara has been a huge disappointment this year, and it's the Mike Thomas show. Everybody knows it, and nobody can stop it. So he's somebody I like. Dude, talk to me. We were talking Slack. Someone asked a question about Ryan Tannehill this week over who was it, Tom Brady or Kyler Murray. I was on the Tannehill train. You said you would. You at the time anyway, that you think you'd rather play Murray or Brady. Talk to me about Tannehill, because he's kind of been the hotness at quarterback. Is it the matchup this week at home against Houston? Is it just the run first offense? What don't you like about Ryan Tannehill?
Yeah, so I mean, with Tannehill, I think on the surface, if this was a normal week, I think think differently. But now we're in the playoffs, you have to think a little bit differently because of, there is no next week for you. So I think so. So with him, one, yes, they are a run first offense. They only throw the ball, I think it's 43% of the time or something like that. Even last week, you go back to last week where he had a great week, and I mean, he only threw the ball 27 times. Like, that is certainly a concern for him. And so, it's all going to depend on game flow here in this matchup. And if you look at, like, one of his best targets, like we just talked about, was AJ Brown. AJ Brown is certainly a deep threat, and that's kind of where he makes a lot of his gain. The problem is that the Texans are number 9 against deep passes. Like, they have been solid against deep passes. Now they're terrible against short and intermediate passes. I think they're 30th in the league in defending that. So right now, like, I don't know. I think that you view this game, especially being in Tennessee, where they're going to try to establish the run, and they are going to try to keep Deshaun Watson off the field. I don't think this is a game where they have to throw it. Now if it goes the other direction, and if Houston's able to, get up quickly and score a couple touchdowns early, and they're forcing Ryan Tannehill to throw, maybe it'd be a little bit different. I mean, I know some people are going to look at this and say, well, wait a minute, look at what Drew Lock did to, against them last week. I think they just got caught sleeping on the Broncos thing, and this was going to be an easy game. We don't have to worry about the Broncos. It's Drew fucking Lock. Who cares about that guy? Like, we're not going to get beat by them, and just kind of came out and got punched in the mouth. Like, we see it all the time in the NFL. Like, there's variance in the NFL. Like, there's things that happen. We just kind of can't explain it. That's one of them. I don't think Drew Lock is all of a sudden is gonna be some as an elite level quarterback and all this other stuff. I just think it was kind of one of those things. So I think Tannehill can be a little bit of a trap. I think I still have him as a QB1 this week. But I think Kyler Murray is in a fantastic spot. And the other thing I really like about him is obviously his ability to pick up yards on the ground. I think this home matchup against Cleveland, I think there's just lots of like here in this game. And so I like Kyler Murray as a bounce back. And I know people seem to be further down on him. Now, granted, he hasn't been great as a passer. I mean, really outside of a couple games this year, he hasn't been fantastic. But I just like this matchup a lot for him. And that's why I like Kyler Murray a little bit more. And I just think there's a lot of red flags around Ryan Tannehill. I mean, we're believing in Ryan Tannehill. Okay. Like, if you would have asked, like, hell, if we would have said that 8 weeks ago, people would have laughed at you, right? Like, fucking Ryan Tannehill's not going to be like a legit option. But I mean, he has been. Yeah. So I have to give him that. And if he does come out and does well, I'm not going to be surprised. But I just feel like Kyler Murray has a little bit more upside, in my opinion.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm looking at some of his numbers here, and he's had over 30 pass attempts twice since he's become the starting quarterback. And his line against Jacksonville 3 weeks ago, 14 of 18 for 259 and 4 scores. So I mean, he's been doing it on some crazy efficiency. I get it. I see that. I like I said, I like him this week just because of it's the matchup. Derrick Henry and that hammy. I mean, he set out today, but apparently they said that's kind of part of the plan and keeping, trying to keep him fresh and have him ready. So, I mean, you got to think that Houston's going to want to come out swinging. I mean, the divisional games do tend to be lower scoring just in general, but I mean, I think if you needed him as a streaming option, I think he was definitely viable. So, who else do we want to talk about this week? I think we can go back to Ryan Fitzpatrick. He has the away matchup against the Giants. Obviously, there's nothing to be afraid of in terms of that matchup. The Giants are giving up the 7th most passing yards per game and the 5th highest touchdown percentage through the air. So I think if you need another kind of streaming option, you don't like what you have in your starters, or if you've just been streaming the quarterback position all year, I think Ryan Fitzpatrick is someone that we can go back to. And like I said in the beginning, it doesn't really seem to matter who is healthy and who is not, just that next man up. And Ryan Fitzpatrick is just going to degaff his way to 250 yards and 2 scores. Is there on the flip side, is there anybody that you don't like this week? Or is there somebody that if you had him as your starter that you'd be looking to sit at all? Because as I'm going through and looking at these matchups, like there's not too many that jump out to me where if you had somebody as the starter that's like, man, I really don't want to play him, like someone like where you would feel better streaming somebody.
It's tough because I'm sitting here looking at it. I'm like I don't think there's anybody that really like ultimately like stands out. Like I guess if you like maybe like I mean I know I said I would start him over Tannehill, but like a Tom Brady I think is certainly questionable. That offense is looked awful. This is against Cincinnati, but I still feel like this is a game where you could see the Patriots lean on their running game a little bit more than they typically would. I guess Josh Allen probably stands out to me as somebody against Pittsburgh. This Pittsburgh defense has been for real. It's the reason they have the record that they have. The thing with Josh Allen, though, is his rushing ability. Are they going to be able to contain that? So, I'm not super high on Josh Allen. I think there's other guys I'd rather play. Like, I would rather play Ryan Tannehill in that matchup. Kyler Murray, not that I think Kyler Murray is going to be readily available for people. But like a Ryan Fitzpatrick, even a Jared Goff, I think stands out as plays that I would probably, or people that I would rather stream over them, or even maybe a Gardner Minshew, going against Oakland, I think is in a better matchup than what he is. So in terms of the ceiling, somebody that I think people are going to have question marks about is going to be Carson Wentz this week going against Washington. They are, we already talked about Alshon Jeffrey is out. They're missing a ton of pieces. However, I mean, Washington, I'm just not nervous about it. Like, I still would prefer to play Carson Wentz in this matchup against the Redskins, the game they absolutely need. They still have Zach Ertz. I think, Dallas Goedert, even a Greg Ward who has kind of stepped up a little bit. Maybe they get Nelson Aguilar back this week. So, even without Alshon, like, I'm fine with Carson Wentz, and I think that he's in a fantastic spot. So I think a lot of people would rather, there are people even looking to sit him, and I would rather play. I definitely would play him.
Yeah, but the matchup there isn't going to scare you. The thing with Wentz is he hasn't been great this year, so maybe you do have a better option. Either maybe you stash somebody, which, I mean, something we typically don't recommend, especially at that position, but maybe you have somebody stashed. I mean, somebody I think you could look to sit, but I don't think you have to. Matt Ryan at San Francisco, it's not a great matchup, but I believe Sherman is out. So, I mean, that'll obviously help because he's kind of returned, not to his Seahawk level play, but definitely better than how he was looking last year, his first year in San Francisco. But I mean, other than that, man, that's the nice thing, kind of just as a general overlook for this week is the guys that got you there. There's not too many matchups I see this week where it's like, all right, you should really think about sitting him. So, I think unless there's anything else you want to tack on here for the quarterback position, we can probably move on.
Let's go ahead and jump over to running backs. So this week, I think, not to hammer on the top guys, but I think some of the ones that are, I think, on the most interesting spots, I actually have, and this may be a little bit hot take, maybe I'm a little crazy here, but I have Derrick Henry as my number one running back this week, and half point PPR. So but it's hard not to. The dude has been a monster. It's right back to Derrick Henry smash time of the year where he just absolutely hammered it and crushed it. So, right now, he's having his best year of his career right now. In 2019, he has, 1,200 yards rushing, 15 touchdowns. The guy's just been a monster. And so, this matchup against Houston, like I said, I think they're going to really want to run the ball. You can run against Houston. I kind of went back and forth with him and Christian McCaffrey. Christian McCaffrey has not been getting as many opportunities on the ground. However, he's getting hammered with targets, right? So the last 2 weeks, he's had 24 targets each of the last 2 weeks. And if you add up, he has, I think, almost 50 or 50 plus targets the last 4 weeks. Like, he's just being hammered with targets. So, in PPR formats, he's definitely still number one, but half point PPRs have Derrick Henry a little bit higher than him. But, this matchup going against Seattle, I'm not really all that concerned with it. The problem with them is that they've just been getting hammered. And so they just haven't been able to run the ball, which There is some concern, I think, now if they're out of it, they're done, they're eliminated. Do you think they continue to feed him as much with I mean, only a few games left in the year? Do you really want to continue piling on all these touches when you don't really need to?
I mean, I think it would make sense to just shut him down for the year. You know what I mean? Like you said, there's no, like, they're obviously not in any kind of playoff contention whatsoever, even if they were to get help and have, how we see each week, if this team loses and this team wins, but if they beat them or if they tie here, like, I don't think there's any scenario in which Carolina gets in. And this guy being literally the centerpiece of your entire offense, I think they should look at, sitting him down. It would suck for me in the Scott Fish Bowl for sure. But as a team and as an organization, like, I definitely think that's something that they should look into. As far as your Derrick Henry call at 1 overall, doesn't really seem like it's that hot takey, man. Looking at the Fantasy Pros consensus rankings, and he is number 2 behind McCaffrey. So you're definitely not alone there with having Henry as your top overall running back for the week.
Yes, I mean, the only thing that scares me with Derrick Henry is the fact that he can get game scripted out of it because he does not catch a lot of passes. So that's certainly a real thing, or something that people can be concerned with. But you're not sitting Derrick Henry no matter what anyway.
No.
So yeah, I mean, there's just some concern there with that. But some of the other guys that I think, like Saquon Barkley, one of the best matchups he's going to get all year. Now with Eli back, we know he is going to throw a lot of dump offs to him. We didn't see it as much last week, but they were able to kind of build a lead there against Philly pretty quickly. This is a much better matchup. Philly's defense is light years ahead of Miami. So Saquon's fine. Chris Carson, now we talk about Rashad Penny now. He's going to see 80% of the opportunities. Yep. So I mean, top guys, the ones I would be concerned about would be like an Alvin Kamara, again. But I think we don't have a choice. You're starting Alvin Kamara if you got him. You're starting Aaron Jones if you got him. Aaron Jones, we saw it last week again. He comes out and pops off and gets you 30-plus fantasy points. Yeah. And then this will probably come out and give you 3. Like, it's just what Aaron Jones has been. It's so frustrating. He's become the Tyreek Hill of running backs. So let's get some more interesting part of this, because again, if you're in the fantasy playoffs, you're not sitting any of these guys. But let's get to where more of a range of probably guys you would at least consider, either sitting or starting here. What are you doing with guys like Phillip Lindsay, David Montgomery, Mark Ingram, Joe Mixon?
Phillip Lindsay is one of my favorite starts this week, just based off the matchup, and then also just based off of his usage over the past couple of weeks. That report came out that Fangio wanted to kind of give him the bulk of the work and kind of just commit to him instead of having that 50-50 split they had at the beginning of the year. And since that has come out, Lindsay has at least 16 rush attempts in 3 of his last 4 games, and Royce Freeman hasn't reached double-digit carries since week 8. Then if you look at the matchup, Kansas City is behind only Carolina in giving up half PPR fantasy points per game to the running back position. So he's one of my favorite starts this week. I think if you have him, you can roll him out there pretty confidently. And just one of those scenarios where you would think that Denver, first of all, wants to attack their weakness, and that's where Kansas City's weakest. I think their passing defense is up to I think 6th overall in DVOA. So obviously that's where the strength of that defense lies. And obviously you want to keep Pat Mahomes and that offense off the field as much as possible. So I would expect a heavy dose of Phillip Lindsay in that game. David Montgomery also has another solid matchup, and Mitchell Trubisky he's looked pretty solid over the last couple of weeks, man. He's making some throws. He actually looks competent compared to what we were looking at him as over the last couple of weeks. So if David Montgomery is a flex level starter, I wouldn't be mad at that, because he's still obviously leading in carries between him and Tariq Cohen. he hasn't been great. He hasn't been super efficient or effective with his carries, but he over the last couple of weeks 20, 16, 13, 14, 17. So he's handling the bulk of the touches there. Joe Mixon is somebody that I would look to sit. Going up against New England, it's not a good matchup either way. He has been getting more work, especially over the last couple of weeks, ever since the Raiders game. I think is that the one they were trailing for the majority of the game, and he still ended up getting like 30 touches or something crazy like that. Yeah. Yep. So since then, like it's kind of seemed like they have recommitted to him, but even with that volume going up against New England, you got to figure that New England's going to come out and just pound them, or at least they should. So out of those couple that you mentioned, Mixon would be the one that I would definitely be sitting. Montgomery, I think you can get away with playing him as a flex level kind of guy, and then Philip Lindsay, definitely in the RB2 conversation for this week.
Yeah, so let me get back to this real quick. We do have a question. I want to answer those as they come in. What's up, guys? Pick two: Mahomes, Dak, or Winston. You know, there's more of a question, Amok, that you would think behind a Mahomes than you would on a normal week. But I know Winston's a lock for me. Like I said, I have him as my number 2 quarterback. But I can see the argument, as crazy as it sounds, to go Dak over Mahomes, just because I feel like that really ever since that injury has happened with him, that we haven't really seen that huge explosive game. Now, I guess, against Tennessee, he did have 400 yards passing, and I'm the biggest Mahomes truther, homer, whatever you want to call it there is, right? I wear Patrick Mahomes pajamas when I go to bed and blah, 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 blah. And it is notable that he just hasn't been really the same. Like, we're not seeing the sort of, the magic, if you will, from him, where he's running around and scrambling and making these crazy plays. The offense just really hasn't been as in sync. We do have a lot of missing parts that are coming and going out of the offense and stuff like that. It's been only a couple of weeks that all the pieces have been there, but I still, with that all being said, I just can't see myself sitting Mahomes, going against that. I think I still have to go Winston and Mahomes, but if you wanted to go Dak, like, I know I'm hedging here, like, I wouldn't be upset about it. I just think Winston's a lock for me, though.
Yeah, I'd agree. That's one of those ones, man, where if I had the guts to sit Mahomes and then he goes off, like, dude, I don't know, man. That's just one of those ones where I just wouldn't be able to live with myself. Like, that would just make me sick to my stomach. Like, I'm gonna roll Mahomes and Winston there, but like you said, little hedge life for the both of us. I could see wanting to start Dak, but give me Mahomes and Winston in that case.
Yeah, he has that. I don't know. Like, it's tough, right? To even consider it, but I mean, they just haven't been playing as well, and I could see this game turning out to be much more like Oakland a couple of weeks ago, where they still were able to put up 28 points to kind of steamroll the Broncos, but in a game where they just don't really have to utilize Mahomes that much, and they get on the goal line, and Shady runs one in, and Damian Williams, if he comes back, or Spencer Ware, whomever, finds the end zone, and then he only throws for one touchdown, 300 yards and a touchdown. Like, it just doesn't do anything for you. So I could see it. I know I'm trying to talk myself into it, but on the other hand, I could, it wouldn't shock anybody if he goes out and throws up 403. So I just think matchup wise, I feel like that he's in still a better matchup than what Dak is. The Rams defense has been much, much better lately. They continue to come on. They're kind of that team that's kind of that late season run right now. And I mean, they just made the Seahawks look terrible last week, so I know that game was at home. This game is on the road. So, but still, like, it's hard to, and as bad as the Cowboys have looked.
Yeah, there's obviously nothing data wise to speak to this, but it just feels like, and I hate this. I hate when people say this, but I'm going to throw this out there. It just feels like Mahomes is due for one of his just absurd games. Like, we haven't had one of those from him for a while. So like I said, I hate that narrative. Like that's nothing you can obviously like act upon. It's more of a gut call, but like it really does just feel like Mahomes is due for one of his 404 kind of games.
Yeah, so hopefully that helped. I know we hedged a little bit there, which I hate. It's like the antithesis. I hate it. It's like my pet peeve for myself. I never want to do it because that's not what we're about. But I think this is a tough matchup, and this is a tough one. It's in the playoffs, so I think talking through it was probably a good idea. But yeah, it's still Mahomes and Winston for me.
Yeah.
Hopefully you get that dub. We'll see you next week for that fantasy championship. And so, anyways, let's go back to the running backs that we were kind of discussing here. Philip Lindsay, I think, is in a great spot. Whether they get down, whether they're trailing, I still think they utilize him as a pass catcher. They're still going to try to establish the run a little bit here. As you mentioned, it's kind of been the blueprint to stop the Chiefs is to keep them off the field, to stay in long drives, utilize your running game. That's kind of how teams have been able to beat Kansas City, whether it's on the road or at home. The Chiefs are number 3 in fantasy points per game on the season. They've just kind of been wrecked by that. Yeah, I think Philip Lindsay is at a tough spot. Yeah, the only thing that would be so tilting is, all of a sudden they decide to give Royce Freeman 30 or give him 50 to 60% of the snaps or something like that all of a sudden, which we've seen it this year. So I don't think Philip Lindsay's a lock, but I just think this is a great spot for him. Mm-hmm. So I actually have Philip Lindsay as my RB13, just outside of an RB1. I do like David Montgomery. It's tough, though, because, we don't ever know which way they're going to use them. If they're trailing, then it could very well be much more of a Tariq Cohen type of game. But, I still think, if you have him, I think at the very least as a flex option, I think that's an interesting play. Past that, like we talked about, if Josh Jacobs does miss this game, which I'm hoping that DeAndre Washington becomes a lock as an RB2, especially against Jacksonville. Jacksonville has been horrendous against the run. I mean, they've given up the second most fantasy points. They've allowed 1,000, or they've allowed 1,500 yards and 14 touchdowns on the ground so far this season. The only team that's been worse is Carolina, who has given up 1,571 and 21 rushing touchdowns, which is just terrible. So, another thing that, talk about Philip Lindsay as well, too, the Chiefs have been really bad against pass catching backs as well. They've allowed 77 receptions, and they've allowed the most receiving yards to the position as well. So, so I think there's just a lot to like on Phil Lindsay this week. So, past that, what are you doing with a guy like Raheem Mostert? I know we talked about him last week. Are you feeling comfortable enough to play him again against Atlanta?
That was somebody I was hoping I was going to be able to ask you about and not have to answer this one. But it seems like they're riding the hot hand with him. Tevin Coleman has basically been relegated to, breather duties. He's getting 2-3 carries a game. So I don't think you have to worry about him. Matt Breida, he's always somebody who I think could come in and maybe he has the kind of explosive plays, the big chunk yardage, and that kind of flips. But right now, man, it just seems like they're riding the hot hand with Raheem. So he's somebody you picked up off of waivers. So you should have players ahead of him that are in more predictable spots where you can look at their usage and feel better about it. But if you don't, as a flex level play, I think you can roll him out there. There's nothing with Atlanta that really that the matchup's going to bother you at all. The only thing there is, even though Coleman's only getting 3 to 4 touches per game, that's still 3 to 4 it's taking away from Raheem. And if Breida is healthier and they want to get him more involved, he's obviously going to take away more touches than Coleman is. But I still think that you can roll him out. They're having Manny Sanders throw him touchdowns, and they're getting him involved all over the field and in a bunch of different ways. So, yeah, I definitely think you can roll him out. Do you have any different thoughts on him? And then someone I'll throw to you. What are you doing with Austin Eckler this week after his ridiculous week 14?
Yeah, so it's hard not to play him, right? I mean, the dude's been money the last couple of weeks. Yeah, I think you roll him out there as a flex. You know, if you have him, I don't know. I don't know how you don't. I mean, the Falcons have been decent against the run this year. So I do think it's a little bit more of a question than what you normally would, but they are home favorites. Kind of everything aligns for them. They've been, one of the best running teams in the league this year. So yeah, I think you could, a spot you could go to would be with him. Then Austin Eckler, you can play him every week, right? I think that if this is a back and forth game or high scoring, he's going to get plenty of opportunities as a pass catcher as well. He's certainly the more explosive one. I know there's been talk of that maybe they could bring Melvin Gordon back, but at this point, as well as Austin Eckler played, why even think about bringing him back? Why pay him all this money whenever you still have Austin Eckler on a rookie deal? It doesn't make any sense to me. So I like Austin Eckler. I have him ranked ahead of him. I have Austin Eckler right now as my RB 20. So again, Minnesota, I think, a tough team to run on. So I think you expect a little bit more on the ground. Some other ones that I guess I want to talk about, one that I think not as many people are going to be on, and people will probably sit, is Marlon Mack. Going against New Orleans, on paper, you look at this and you're like, well, this probably isn't great, right? Like, this is a terrible matchup. The Saints have been great against the run. What's there really to like about this? Why would you even play them, especially if they get behind, because they don't utilize them as a pass catcher as much? My thing is that they play Sheldon Rankins on IR today and Marcus Davenport on IR. That's a pretty two big hits on their defensive line. And so honestly, I think that opens things up a little bit more. I think if you are the Colts, that's what you're going to want to do. That's the only way I can see them being able to keep up with them with the Saints, is trying to keep Drew Brees off the field. So I think playing some Marlon Mack isn't the craziest thing in the world, where I think a lot of people are going to want to sit him, especially last week he did save some people with that touchdown that he was able to get, but it wasn't great. 13 for 38, I believe.
Yeah, I did not see that. I know last week they were without two of their starting linebackers as well. So, yeah, man, if they're missing two of their starting linemen and two of their starting linebackers, that matchup definitely looks a lot better than what it typically would. Is he somebody you're going to be playing in a lot of DFS, just given what you were talking about? Like, his ownership's probably going to be suppressed because of what you were just saying.
Well, since they play Monday night, he's not on the main slate.
Oh, yeah.
But if you're playing like a showdown slate, he's certainly an interesting play, because I don't think many people are going to be on him.
Good call.
Is there anybody else? So before we jump over to wide receiver, is there anybody else like a lower end guy that maybe you might have some interest in? Like a Jamal Williams, who's had some opportunities and kind of has his weeks where he's whenever he gets more opportunities out of the backfield as a pass catcher, because he's the preferred pass catching back there, or even a guy like Sony Michel and what looks to be a great matchup against the Bengals.
I can't do it with Sony Michel anymore. I tried. I was pounding the table for him at the beginning of the year. I didn't understand why people were so low on him, and he did me dirty, man. So it looks like a great matchup, but he's also been in these spots before. Last week against Kansas City, he had 5 rushes for 8 yards or something, like something just completely ridiculous. So that's, with how disappointing he's been all year, again, that's probably I would start Mostert over him super easily. That's one that I wouldn't even think of. Someone further on down the list, if you're desperate, hopefully you're not at this point in the second week of your playoffs, but I think you might be able to go back to, I was talking about him earlier when we were talking about quarterbacks, but Ronald Jones and Peyton Barber going up against Detroit. Like I said, this should be something where Tampa Bay should be able to control this game from beginning to end, even with as bad as their secondary is. Like this will be the true test of just how awful their secondary is, right? Going up against the third string quarterback with nobody outside of Kenny Golladay to throw to. So this will be interesting to see just how bad they are. But Detroit's allowing the fourth most fantasy points per game. It's a situation where, like I said, if you're desperate, maybe you're in a deeper league where like a 14, 16 team league, or you have an extra flex spot or two. With as disappointing as it's been for Ronald Jones after it came out that he was going to be the guy and he was going to get the bulk of the carries. Well, they've kind of went back to that 50-50 split. So for as far as plays further on down the list, like those are two that I think you could roll out as flex level plays given the matchup. Other than that, man, like I said, I really don't think that there's really much else to talk about as far as running back goes. So let's go ahead and jump over to wide receiver. Again, like I said at the beginning of the show, this is something where this week, like, there's really not too many matchups that I'm overly concerned about when it comes to having to think about sitting somebody. Tennessee, on paper, like they don't seem to be an awful secondary in terms of what they're giving up and for fantasy points and everything, but they have had some injuries in their secondary. So, I mean, you're not sitting D-Hop by any means at all, no matter what the matchup is. He's one of those matchup proof kind of guys, especially with Watson back there. He's always liable to go out and just make one of those ridiculous, Houdini kind of escapes and throws. So, but that's someone where you might not be expecting that much from D-Hop if you're just looking at it in terms of season long and what Tennessee's been doing on defense, but you're not going to be scared off of anything there. Somebody so you might be looking at and kind of worried about Allen Robinson. They have the road game division at Green Bay, but earlier in the year, I think he went that first game. He went 7 for 13 targets, 7 catches, 102 yards. So I don't think he's somebody you have to worry about either if you're rolling him out as a wide receiver 2 or a flex option there. Keenan Allen, Minnesota. That's another one of those defenses like Jacksonville where you're looking at it, and at the beginning of the year, that looks like a team that you should be worried about. Minnesota has been getting burned all year. The only thing that I'd be nervous about with that matchup isn't even with Keenan Allen in the secondary. It would be Minnesota's defensive line going up against the Chargers' offensive line. It just might be a game where Rivers doesn't have a lot of time, but with Keenan Allen operating in the slot, he should have those quick short passes readily available to him. So Keenan should still be able to give you double-digit points even in a half PPR league. In terms of anybody that you're looking at, good matchup, bad matchup, someone that you're thinking about sitting for wide receiver, Kev, is there anybody that jumps out to you? What are you looking at just kind of as an overall overarching look at the receiver plays this week?
Yeah, so one, some guys that stand out to you at the top that I think people should be feeling pretty good about this week outside of the really obvious plays. Jarvis Landry really kind of stands out. Like it's been somebody that a lot of people, especially in redraft, that have really talked about all that much. But I mean, if you just look at his numbers over the last 4 weeks, like I love this matchup for them. Like he's kind of been the right one, despite having Odell Beckham there. But I mean, his weighted opportunity rating is number 1 on this, this week at 0.72, which opportunity rating is target share plus or air yards and their target share combined. It's a great stats you can go find over on airyards.com. Shout out to Josh Hermsmeyer, who offers that stuff for free. But it's a great thing to kind of look at as a barometer of how players are doing over the last 4 weeks. Excuse me. And then you also, one thing that really stood out to me when looking into him is his yards per route run. Like, he's typically a guy that we kind of talk about as kind of that short area guy that's underneath intermediate routes. That's who he's always was. Even last year in Cleveland, that's kind of who he was. But this year, it's kind of changed. Like, over the last 4 weeks, he has a 2.7 yards per route run, which is pretty solid. I mean, those are up there with some of the top guys, especially the deep threats, And so I really like to see, you like to see that. Over the last 4 weeks, he's also averaged 85 yards. So this is a terrific matchup. Arizona, you pretty much can beat them anywhere. They're 30th against defending the deep ball. They're 32nd in short routes. So overall, like, I think Jarvis Landry is a fantastic play this week. And if you got him, you feel fantastic while playing him. He is a wide receiver 1 for me this week.
Sticking with Cleveland, what are you doing with Odell Beckham? Dude, that matchup is you couldn't ask for anything better. But I mean, what the news came out that I think Baker was kind of slamming the athletic training team and the doctors, just saying that they misdiagnosed his injury and it should have been a 1 to 2 week absence at the beginning of the year, but he's just been banged up since because of that sports hernia. Is he somebody you would debate sitting?
Yeah, I mean, look at the results that he's yielded. I mean, so 5.9 against Cincinnati, great matchup, right? I mean, one that you easily want to target him. 5.9. Pittsburgh, 5.9. Now against Miami, he did get 20.4, 6 catches, 84 yards, and a touchdown. But then you go back, Pittsburgh, 10. It just hasn't been a great year. He only has 2 touchdowns on the season. Depending on who you have and what's available to you, yeah. I mean, I think you can, even though it's a great matchup and everything else, you could sit Odell Beckham, right? I'd be interested to know how many people that are in the playoffs that actually own Odell Beckham, right? Because he's somebody that people probably draft with their second overall pick, and just hasn't really worked out this year for whether it's been injuries or what have you. So, I mean, it really would depend on what your other options would be, depending on if you could sit him or not. He didn't have anything great. I think you have to roll him out there, but. If you have it, if you could pick up an AJ Brown, for example, who has played, has been a monster, especially lately. I think I would play AJ Brown over him. I would play Courtland Sutton over him. I would really be thinking hard about a guy like Christian Kirk or Michael Gallup, playing him over him. I think that's where we've gotten with Odell Beckham.
Yeah, man, it sucks. Given where you drafted him, and then especially at this point of the year, your fantasy playoffs, this matchup, I think you have to look at potentially sitting him. If you sit him this week, I don't think it's crazy. And just to touch on what you were saying with Jarvis Landry, over the last 3 weeks, he is 4th amongst wide receivers in air yards. So just kind of to add to what you were saying with, 4th. Just add to what you were saying with, kind of what his role what he was kind of locked into the first couple of years of his career. Now he is 4th in air yards, just behind Robbie Anderson. Here's another one that threw me off. Julian Edelman is 2nd, D-Hop, and then Landry. So I just found that interesting. What if you happen to have both Emmanuel Sanders and Deebo Samuel on the same team, which obviously that trade happened halfway through the year. Do you have a strong opinion on who you would want to start with either of those? And side note, I am asking because I have to make that decision in a dynasty league. So.
Yeah, it's a tough one. Flip a coin. I guess the only scary thing with this one is, are they really going to have to throw the ball? Atlanta's offense is good enough to be able to to be able to keep up with San Francisco and kind of keep it a game, especially with the Richard Sherman injury. Like that could end up being a pretty big deal for them. That's kind of a lockdown side that they had, and so I guess we'll see how that turns out. And we know Atlanta, they still have Julio, they still have Austin Hooper, so they still have some weapons there. So I would probably lean, if I had to, gun to my head, I would probably lean Emmanuel Sanders, but I think it's super close. I think you could play either one of them. Probably feel pretty good about. So yeah, I mean, I think flip a coin right now. Maybe ask me again later in the week when I look a little bit more into it. But yeah, right now I would do Emmanuel Sanders. Let's go ahead, and we have another question from Daddy Cooley. I like that name. James Conner. This is a tough one. James Conner, Marlon Mack, or Josh Jacobs. Like we already talked about. Josh Jacobs may not play. He may play. He may not play. If he does play, I don't think you feel confident that can he finish the entire game. What's his usage going to be like? James Conner, same thing. Returning from, if he plays this week, I think he returned to practice, or he's practicing this week. But that's what they're playing. What, Buffalo this week?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, that is a not good matchup. Now, I will say, you can run against Buffalo. That is an area of weakness for them. But how many opportunities is he going to see? Are they? I highly doubt they go out there, run him out there, and he gets 60 to 70% of the backfield. Like with all the other options they have, they've proven they don't really need him to win. Like I can't imagine they just load him up with a ton of options. And then the Marlon Mack one, which I kind of talked about, the play that I really like, but it's still super risky because if they fall behind, it's night for Marlon Mack.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think if.
He also has Mossert and Kamara.
Dude, how absurd is that? Is like that's even like a that's even an option. Like, well, I do have Kamara if I had to start him. Like, dude, talk about would he be the front runner for biggest bust for you? Just kind of off subject.
I think it'd have to be David Johnson.
You would pick DJ over Kamara?
Yeah, I think David Johnson would be a bigger bust. Though he did come out of nowhere last week and catch a touchdown. I'm like, what? Like, where did this come from?
Yeah, back to the question. If we get the news that Josh Jacobs gets cleared, he is going to play, and he's expected to handle a full workload. I think he would be the one out of those first three that I would lean on. Connor got a full practice in today. And just a side note, Juju is also expected to return this week. And if there's a weakness on that Bills defense, it is their run D. They're a lot easier to run on than they are to be thrown on for sure. So, I mean, I would still expect, just with the way that they have used him in the past. I mean, I think Connor's probably, if they've held him out for 4 games now. So they, with as crazy as it sounds, they are in playoff contention. I think they have the final wild card spot as of right now, trying to hold off Tennessee. Just with the way they've used him in the past, I mean, I think you can still realistically expect probably 13 to 15 touches. I would think. They're just one of those teams that although the past couple weeks have been super weird with getting Kareth White and Benny Snell and Jalen Samuels involved, but I think if Connor is truly fully healthy, or as healthy as he can be at this point of the season, I think he gets the bulk of the workload. Man, who would be your top 3 out of all those options? So let's say he's rolling out 2 running backs and a flex. Who would you be rolling out there? Is Mostert locked into one of those for you? I think he's locked into one of those spots for me.
I think if it was me, I would go Kamara for sure, and then Jacobs if he is going to play. It's just way too good of a matchup against the Jaguars. The Jaguars, we've already talked about that. It's so risky, though, just because of re-injury. If something happens, they immediately pull him? Do they limit him? But I think you have to roll out. I think I would have to still roll out Josh Jacobs. Like, I would feel like the biggest idiot if I sat him and he goes for 100 and a touch, So I think it would be them two. And then I think the decision comes down to James Conner, Marlon Mack, and Raheem Mostert. And I think I probably would go.
That's tough.
You know what? I probably would go James Conner. The more I think about it, the more I think about it. If he gets in full practice this week and he is ready to go, I think it's just a better matchup. I think he would be the definite RB1 there. And in San Francisco, they still have Tevin Coleman, they still have Breida, they still have Jeff Wilson. Not that it's not as good of a matchup. Atlanta's been decent against the run this year, so I think I would probably go James Conner. Just for reference, the Bills are 6th in pass DVOA, and they're 17th in run DVOA. So they're kind of middle of the road, pretty average against the run. So, I think I would go Conner.
Yeah, that's tough. I think
you're swinging for upside, right? Like that's what we're swinging for now. And you're in the playoffs. It's week 14. There's no next week for you. You just have to go with upside here. And I think James Conner represents the most upside for me of the rest of them. Yeah, I mean, Mostert could have another good game, but right now, like, I think I would go James Conner and then Josh Jacobs and Kamara. Now, in the event that Josh Jacobs was ruled out, then I would probably slide in Mostert, and then I would also ask if DeAndre Washington, which I'm sure he's not, because I'm pretty sure he's pretty much the number one waiver ad.
Yeah, I agree with that. Well, I mean, Washington jumped up to he only has 32% ownership in Yahoo League, so he's still out there.
Yeah, so pretty much that was the longest our style. That's what we do. We just kind of go the whole way around with it. So,
yeah, I mean, like I said there, like at the beginning of the show, like there's when it comes to like these start-sit decisions, like there's not too many matchups that are really having you like thinking about like sitting your studs. So the guys that kind of got you there, like this week isn't a great week as far as start and sits go, outside of like like an Odell Beckham. But the only reason why you're thinking about sitting him literally has nothing to do with the matchup. He's just been super disappointing. Would you rule out somebody like Darius Slayton with the Giants matchup going up against Miami?
Oh, for sure.
It's your boy.
Went ham last week against the Eagles, especially in the first half, where he had 150 yards and two tutties. So, this is a great Darius Slayton week against Miami. They pretty much can be beaten at all quadrants of the field. So, Eli really showed a pretty strong chemistry with him. I think him and Sterling Shepard are in both pretty good spots. So, I think this could be the Eli, blow up week where all of a sudden he's like, maybe I will come back next year, against Miami, where he gets a little ahead of himself, because he actually didn't look terrible. I mean, against the Eagles.
No, although I think it was that maybe one of the first passes he had, the one to Slayton on the left sideline. It wasn't a touchdown, but it was like one of his deep throws, and it looked like he put everything into that throw, man. It was like a 30-air yard kind of throw. So it was just like, man, if he had to throw that ball 2 or 3 more yards, I don't think he would make it. But just in general, I think just as a whole, like a team, I think I would just be sitting completely would be the Jets going up against Baltimore. If you're looking for that boom bust kind of guy, I would rather play Slayton over somebody like Robbie Anderson. That's just a matchup where I want nothing to do with any of the pieces on the Jets side. And if you're looking at playing Crowder, you definitely have a piece on your team, or at least you should, that offers that same that same floor if you're looking for a floor. But like you said, at this point, you're not playing for next week. This is the only week you're playing for. So, I mean, if you need somebody further on down, if DJ Chark doesn't play, Chris Conley, I have to talk about him. Get my weekly Chris Conley plug in. At Oakland, that might be a game where literally Oakland runs away with it in the beginning. So maybe we see some Minshew magic and getting hooked up with Conley and D.D. Westbrook if Chark sits. Other than that, man, there's not anybody else that's really jumping out to me. We already talked about Watson and Perriman at the beginning of the show. Obviously, if Devontae Parker gets cleared and plays against the Giants, you're going to roll him out. Would you start Juju Smith-Schuster? Like I said, I think he was a full participant today. He's definitely expected to return, but going up against Buffalo, you got to figure he's going to get the Trey White treatment. Is he somebody that you would throw out in his first game back?
Again, it would really depend on who you had. I think you have to be pretty desperate because this is not a great matchup. This is a team. There's going to be two teams that are really going to want to run the ball, and neither one of them are going to kind of open it up. So I can't imagine that he gets a ton of opportunities, and it's just not a great matchup. Like we talked about, Buffalo's 6th in pass DVOA. It just hasn't been Juju's year, but I mean, if you were desperate and just didn't have any other options, yeah, I would roll him out there. But I just wouldn't feel confident in it whatsoever. I just think there's some better options down the line. Like I already mentioned with Darius Slayton, you could make a case for an Anthony Miller who's seen a ton of more, who's gotten a lot more targets. Zach Pascal in a matchup against the Saints where they're going to have to be throwing the ball a ton. Chris Conley, like you mentioned, if we end up seeing where DJ Chark, where it's really looking like he's really unlikely to play this week, Chris Conley becomes a pretty nice add, in my opinion, somebody that I would look at because I think he has a ton of upside going against Oakland. Oakland's just a terrible pass defense. So, that's a direction you could go, or you could play. I would consider playing over him, and if it's PPR, like we already mentioned with Danny Amendola, and we already talked about the other two, and I don't know. I just think there's a lot of other options that I would have to get pretty desperate. Even Nelson Aguilar, which we didn't mention, which I think there's a decent chance he could return this week. Right now, I think they said that his status is up in the air for next week, but we'll see what happens with him. But there's just a lot of things to monitor this week to see how everything's going to work out. And so, right, but like I said, I just wouldn't feel super fantastic about playing somebody like them. Hey, can we talk about this real quick before we move on to tight ends? What the fuck has happened with Brandon Cooks? Like, did he just die?
I don't know. Like, I wish I saw a tweet. I can't remember who put it out, but it was just talking about like the snap percentages and the routes run, and I'm pretty sure Cook was last in both of those on that last game. He played the fewest snaps and ran the fewest amount of routes. Like I was talking to one of my buddies about it, and the only thing I could think of was maybe after he started to play last week that like maybe some of those concussion symptoms started to roll through, so that they pulled him back because obviously they were treading with that pretty lightly when they held him out for it was like 2 or 3 weeks when they were trying to get him to the specialist and get him tested and all that. But it's weird, man. It's I mean, I honestly I have no idea what to think about it. He was always kind of a boom bust guy, but like now he's not even getting the targets and the opportunities, and he's not even on the field when he is active. So it's just been, hopefully that there's an explanation for it. And it's not just, well, he's not playing good, so we'd rather roll out Josh Reynolds. But yeah, dude, that's just one of those ones where I have no explanation for it. I'm really not sure what to think of it, but it sucks to not have don't have an exciting player like him out there. Maybe it's just a case of that Goff doesn't have the time because of how bad that offensive line has been and how much we've seen Goff struggle, that they're like, we're not even going to bother putting him out there because Goff isn't going to have the time or the accuracy to hit him downfield. But it's a weird one, man, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, that'll be a situation we monitor over the offseason. Do they move on from him? So I don't know. I mean, between him and Sammy Watkins, remember Sammy Watkins? Sammy Watkins, week 1, it was pants off over here for Hedge Life, and it has been deathly quiet from Mr. Sammy Watkins since then. That dude is definitely going to be looking for a new job next year because he will not be playing for the Chiefs.
Yeah, ever since week 1, it has been pants on and chastity belt for me.
Yeah. So I think we pretty much kind of hit through all the wide receivers, at least for now. It's just so many injuries, it's kind of hard to project. So let's go ahead and jump over to tight end. Obviously, if you have Kelsey, Ertz, Kittle, Waller, Hunter Henry, and probably even Austin Hooper to an extent, I think you just lock them in. We don't have to have a conversation about those guys. I think Ertz and Kittle, especially Ertz. I mean, Ertz could see 20 targets this week. Wouldn't really surprise me with how little they have there. George Kittle, great matchup against Atlanta. So from there, I know some people are going to want to play like a David Njoku, but I do believe that he's also questionable. But if he's back this week or if he's able to play, if they're playing Arizona, we kind of talked about it on last week. Of course, Vance McDonald did absolutely nothing with that opportunity, which I think you were a little bit more hesitant to play Vance McDonald than I was. But, you win some, you lose some, I guess. But past those guys, like once we get past those kind of like core, you're 100% playing them no matter what. There's nobody that you could possibly have that's better than them. So Gerald Everett right now, he is questionable. They said he's making progress. I don't know if they play him or not. It doesn't sound likely that he plays. So I think Tyler Higbee's in another elite spot against Dallas. Noah Fant, we've already sort of talked about, somebody who just kind of can go off at any moment because he's very explosive. He's not going to see a ton of targets. Even last week on his big week where he had over 100 yards and a touchdown, he still only had 4 targets. But he's somebody that can rip off a 50, 60-yard touchdown anytime the ball's in his hands. And what's likely probably a positive game script for them where they're going to be playing from behind. They're going to have to throw the ball a ton. I think those two are the ones I really like the most. OJ Howard, you certainly can make a case for. Mike Gesicki, especially if they don't have Devontae Parker, Dallas Goedert. I think all those guys are certainly in play. Is there any of those that you like more than the other?
I think you got to look at Tyler Higbee, right? Just with what he's done over the past couple of weeks. I mean, he'd probably be the guy that I would be looking at, like out of that group. Everything lined up for Gesicki last week, man, and like we were talking about, it was Isaiah Ford and Alan Hearns who came through. You touched on Noah Fant, as good as Kansas City's perimeter is on the secondary. They have given it up to tight ends, so I mean, he's someone, like you said, only getting 4 targets or so. That's probably been his average on the year. I really don't think he's had too many games, higher or lower than that. He had 11 targets at Minnesota, but I mean, dude, outside of that, it's a bunch of 4s and 3s and a handful of 5s in there. So, but just with being the athletic spark freak that he is, he's able to take one to the house just on any given notice. If Greg Olsen, he returned in a limited fashion today. If he's unable to go for whatever reason, I think you could go back and look at Ian Thomas going up against Seattle. He's shown pretty well in Olsen's absence, so he's somebody that you can look at. You were talking about David Njoku. He is now dealing with, I guess, a knee injury, so he's questionable. So he's someone that if you picked him up, you picked him off of waivers. But I think you can look elsewhere. And then we already kind of went back and forth with Tennessee and Tannehill, but with Delaney Walker being on IR, Jonnu Smith could be another sneaky option, and what could be a shootout between those two divisional foes. Anyone further down the list that I didn't touch on that you kind of want to touch on here? Like you said, when it comes to tight end, it's pretty cut and dry. And then you just kind of have to look for matchups and cross your fingers and hope. Jack Doyle would be another one who, just with someone that we didn't mention in the wide receivers who hit IR, Paris Campbell was put on IR after the game on Sunday, and then it doesn't look like T.Y. Hilton is expected to return this week, so it could be the Zach Pascal and Jack Doyle show once again.
So for me, I think it's kind of falls right in line with the question that we had too. So, so the question is Mike Gesicki, Noah Fant, Dallas Goedert, or Ian Thomas. At one, I don't know how all those guys are available, so good on you that had these kind of options, because I felt like at least Goddard and Gesicki would have been gone. But that's either here nor there. So I think for me, it probably starts with Gesicki. I mean, he has the safest floor, in my opinion, in terms of target share, and great matchup against the Giants as well. So, and again, if there's no Devontae Parker, I mean, Gesicki could easily see over 10 targets, and I don't think any of these other tight ends have that kind of ceiling. Ian Thomas going against Seattle, but it sounds like Greg Olsen's it could be back. He's back in a limited form, so we'll see on that one. If he's back, then obviously that takes Ian Thomas completely out of the running. Even with him, like, I think Ian Thomas would probably be the second that a guy that I would go to look at. Just because I don't think Noah Fant is going to be somebody that's going to see that kind of target share, and he's going to have to rip off a long touchdown. Kansas City with Juan Thornhill and the Honey Badger, I just think this could be another game where the Broncos just kind of get crushed. So, it's tough too with Dallas Goedert though, because again they're missing so many targets, or they're missing so many players that he's going to have to play well in two tight end sets. So, but for me, I would rank it as Gesicki, then Thomas if Olsen is out, then Goddard, then Fant.
Man, the fact that it's standard, I feel like Fant probably has the best chance to score a touchdown. I think Gesicki probably does give you the floor, like you were talking about, because nobody else in that group is going to see the amount of targets that he should see. Although it lined up for him pretty well last week, and Isaiah Ford and Allen Hurns out targeted him. I think Gesicki might have only had like 4 or 5 targets, even with Devontae Parker leaving with that concussion, and also Albert Wilson as well. Man, it would be a toss up between Gesicki and Fant for me. Like I said, especially given that it's standard. I mean, whenever you're streaming tight end, we say this every single week, but whenever you're streaming tight end, you're hoping for that touchdown anyway. I think Fant probably has the highest chance to score a touchdown, but Gesicki should see the highest amount of targets. I'm going to go Fant here.
Yeah, I don't hate it. I mean, I think he does have a decent ceiling, but it just, I don't know. In terms of this stuff, I'm definitely looking at opportunities. I will say, in Noah Fant's defense, if you look over, even Gesicki as well, the last 4 weeks, Noah Fant is tied for third in 7 red zone targets. So he also has 6 end zone targets. So he is certainly their preferred option inside the red zone. And then you also have Gesicki, who has 6 red zone targets and 5 end zone targets as well. So I think both of them kind of line up that way as pretty solid matchups. And then Ian Thomas obviously hasn't been given as many opportunities. And then, of course, Dallas Goedert is also, doesn't see the field as much. So he has 5 red zone targets, but only 1 end zone target where he's actually scored on and converted. So, yeah, I don't know. I guess looking into him a little bit deeper, Noah Fant is a little interesting. He just is not seeing as many targets as some of these other guys.
Right.
Though, even still, I mean, he has 20 targets over his last 4 weeks. Gesicki only has 24. Goddard has 26. So actually, I mean, he's actually leading all of them and has 19 receptions to 12 receptions for Fant and 13 for Gesicki. So I don't know. That is interesting. So again, where I feel like we're hedging our ass off here. But again, I'd probably stick to it. Yeah, I'd probably maybe switch a little bit, but I'd still go Gesicki 1, Fant 2, Goddard 3, and then Ian Thomas. Because I feel like that Greg Olson's going to play.
Yeah, it seems like he's going to, barring any setbacks. So Thomas last for me as well. Then I would have Fant ahead of Gesicki.
Okay, so that was an interesting debate there. Past that, is there any other ones that kind of sound to you like, if you were just desperate, you had to play a Caden Smith, for example, if Evan Ingram doesn't return this week? I think that's like looking at all of them. That's probably it. I will say this, which has really nothing to do with, because I would not even think about it in fantasy football right now, but Dan Arnold was traded to the Cardinals. I am very interested to see just how they utilize him. Yes. You didn't know that?
I did not see that.
Not traded. He was claimed off waivers, excuse me. The Saints released him, placed him on waivers, and the Cardinals claimed him last week.
I feel like the Cardinals have just been scooping up every available tight end and then just not using them at all. I mean, they have Charles Clay, Max Williams. They picked somebody else up to mid-season, but they just picking all of them up to not use them. I mean, if you're super desperate, like I said, Jonnu Smith is somebody who's going to be widely available with the matchup against Houston. You could go there. I mean, if for some reason all of these guys are owned, or maybe you're running a 2 tight end league or something like that, or maybe like a tight end premium where some of these lower guys are going to carry a little bit more value. I mean, maybe a Hayden Hurst tomorrow. Andrews is expected to play. He's gotten in 2 limited practices in a row, but maybe sometimes his snap percentages and his snap shares are low as is, just because of how many, multiple tight end sets that they run and with how run heavy Baltimore is. But maybe somebody like a Hayden Hurst, if you're making me dig deep down here and look at somebody who, if you're super desperate. But I mean, outside of that, Jonnu Smith would be my top option for a deeper guy like this. And then, if you're kind of rolling the dice and yelling YOLO as you jump out of a window, Hayden Hurst, like I said, just with, maybe that's a case where we see him get a little bit more involved in the passing game, with Mark Andrews being a little banged up.
Yeah, I agree. If Mark Andrews is out, even if he's not, we know that Baltimore loves to throw their tight end. So, yeah. So, other than that, I think that wraps it up. Do you have anything else?
I don't, man. Like I said, just this week, kind of the overarching theme is just go with the guys who got you there, and make sure that you're paying attention to the inactives and everything, and all the reports that are rolling out, as we approach kickoff on Sunday, because that's going to be super important. Like, especially anything that you can get as far as if someone's going to be limited, or if they're not expected to play a full complement of snaps, or somebody like in Josh Jacobs' case, if he is expected to play a full complement of snaps, just make sure you're paying attention to all that and trying to stay on top of it, because week 15, man, you have one more game to get to that money spot, so got to make sure you're paying attention to that and staying on top of it.
Yeah, I think for me, if you're one of those teams that are, let's say you're playing a team that, because now buys are usually over with by now. So let's say you're one of those teams that just played through the first round, and now you're playing a bye week team that has a really, really strong team. It's not look good for you. I'm just swinging for the fences. I'm playing a team that I feel like that has just the highest upside, even if there's some YOLO plays in there, some plays, like a Justin Watson, for example, who's going to be available everywhere. And like somebody like that, where you're just, swinging for the fence, hoping that things work out. If they don't, they don't, because it's already not looking good for you. Because I think that's the best way you can go. Last year, that's kind of, as people ask me, and that's kind of what I told them, and it worked out, and they ended up winning the championship. Like, I know that's not like groundbreaking news, but like a lot of people, I still feel like when they're in the playoffs, they kind of get a little risk averse, because, you obviously there's no next week for you, so you get nervous. Mm-hmm. But you're in a matchup where it's not looking good for you, and it's a tough, the guy you're playing has a ton of just like, high upside, great plays. He has a bunch of studs. He made a couple trades. Things are working out for him. Like, what else do you have to lose at that point? So like, I feel like just swinging for the fences, and every player you play is just high upside. So maybe you sit a guy like, I don't know, Aaron Rodgers, for example, who's playing Chicago, and you start a Ryan Fitzpatrick over him, or even a Patrick Mahomes, for that example, for that matter. If you have somebody that you just feel like just has a Ryan Tannehill, for him, just has a great matchup, or a Kyler Murray or whomever, Mayfield or whatever. Say somebody dropped him earlier and you picked him up, and you're just kind of sitting there with them because, I think that's what you have to do. You have to shoot for straight as much ceiling as you possibly can get.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm going to be playing Darius Slayton over Joe Mixon in one of my higher money dynasty leagues. So, I mean, that's definitely it. Like, this isn't the time to, to turtle, kind of go into your shell and go the safe way out. And the last thing that I'll add here is go with your gut. I mean, jump in the Slack, ask us, ask the TFA fam, what they're thinking, if you're just trying to get some different thoughts and opinions on it. But this is one of those weeks, man, where you just have to go with your gut, and you have to go with how you feel, because if this is one of those situations where if, you ask 10 different people and, you feel really good about a certain matchup, but someone like, 8 of the 10 tell you to do something else, so you roll with that, and that's what ends up costing you. Like, whew, like just go with your gut. That's kind of what I'll say to sign off.
Yeah, there's no scientific evidence to support that, but yeah, no, I think it's I definitely agree. A lot of times, I can't tell you how many times I went against that and ended up just hating myself for it, for not listening to my gut. So I think it's just intuition in your head that's telling you, hey, this is the right call. So, damn dog.
I've never seen a dog from all the times that we've been recording. So I think you just like to smack pots and pans around.
I do, actually. See? Proof.
If you're not watching, Kevin's just making the shadow animals on his wall right now with the dog.
Here he goes again. He keeps trying to pick up his damn bowl. Anyways, well, I guess we can answer this. If Devontae Parker's out, would you start any of the Giants wide receivers like Sterling Shepard or Golden Tate, or a Buccaneers wide receiver like Justin Watson, or another one like Perriman? If you have the option and Parker's out, like, I definitely would start Sterling Shepard.
Yep. Yeah, I agree.
He has actually a rapport with Eli Manning, somebody who has a chemistry with him, and yeah, I would go Shepard.
Yeah. And of the Buccaneers wide receivers, I don't know how you feel about this, Kev, but if I had to pick between the two, I'm going to go Perriman. Just like I said, Watson may have seen a little more playing time last week with the absence of Scotty Miller, and he did return to practice today. So, and Perriman's been involved in 3 wide receiver sets all year. So, of the 2, I would roll Perriman over Watson.
Yeah, I think that's a safer play for sure. And I think he does have obviously he is a solid deep threat. Kind of maybe step into that. I guess you could view him as kind of stepping into that Mike Evans role there in Tampa. Great matchup. So yeah, I mean, I think there's lots of like there. So if you had to play Perriman, I mean, I'm not mad at you. I get it. I don't think that's ultra high ceiling, and neither is Watson. I think they're both kind of YOLO dart throw plays at this point, but they're going to throw the ball to somebody. We know that Tampa Bay loves to throw the ball, but like if I had to make a decision, I'm playing Sterling Shepard of that group. If I have that option, I'm definitely playing Sterling Shepard. And then, I think it would be a conversation with Golden Tate and Brashad Perriman at that point. So,
yeah, I mean, even Golden Tate, given their matchup, and Eli looked good for a little bit there, but we've seen over the past couple of years his arm strength has definitely dwindled, and with we were kind of curious how that was going to work at the beginning of the year with having just a bunch of kind of those middle of the field slot kind of options, and they have basically put Tate in the slot and moved Shepard outside. So Golden Tate would not be a bad option either, just in case somebody snags Shepard before you. But of that group, I would roll Shepard ahead of Tate.
Yeah, I agree. So, and I appreciate the question there on that one. So, anyways, I think with that, it is 11:51 in the old Central Time, and almost 1 a.m. there in the old East Coast. Like that's how dedication there is here on this podcast. We're staying up super late just to bring the takes,
bringing that heat.
Yeah. So, anyways, I hope everybody has a great week 15. Hopefully you guys get those dubs, and so we can do it again next week for the championship week, the banner raising week, if you will. Kawhi went and got his championship ring today in Toronto. And so, hopefully you can get yours next week. So, again, if you have any questions, you can reach out to us on Twitter. You can find me on Twitter at FantasyWrath13, or you can find Cody at CKutzerFF. You can also jump into our Slack chat. I know I think it's About Me section on YouTube. If you're watching this on YouTube, there's a link in there for the Slack channel. You can, like I said, hit us up on Twitter. Email us at thefantasyauthority1@gmail.com. I can get you in there that way as well. I'll send you a link to join. Absolutely free. We have a redraft. We have a DFS channel. Check out our DFS pod that's tomorrow night that we do live on YouTube as well with me and Ryan. It is at DFS DJ Nation. We definitely have the best. I definitely can say with most certainty we have the best intro song of any podcast on that one too. It is the tits, as they say, or I don't think kids say that. I don't know who says that. So
it is said though. It is said. Somebody says it.
Somebody somewhere says it. Anyways, again, appreciate it. Hit that like and subscribe. It really helps us out. We really appreciate it. Again, we've said it multiple times, but over this offseason, we're going to have a ton of content, whether it's rookies leading up to the NFL draft, talking about the offseason moves and stuff like that. We're going to do much more shorter videos on YouTube to kind of be more digestible instead of these long-form podcasts. But we appreciate all the support all year. It's been great. And we'll see you guys next week hopefully at our normal time, as long as nothing pops up on Tuesday evening at a much more manageable time. So other than that, we will see you guys next week, and let's get that W. Peace.